To the outside world, our lives look perfect, even if in reality, they aren't. What do we want in life? What's our goal? To be productive citizens that are a part of a thriving community? To love? To make memories? May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but let's keep the conversation going.
My name is Felicia Brayback, and I get to represent the 55th House District. And the 55th District comprises of part of the city of Ann Arbor and several townships, Ann Arbor, York, Augusta, and Pittsfield townships, and part of the city of Milan. And the background that I bring to mental health is I have my master's degree in clinical social work and my doctorate in clinical psychology. And I get to be the only mental health practitioner out of the 110 state reps. And so bringing that voice, particularly during this month, is really important.
Greetings. I am Senator Marshall Bullock. I represent the 4th Senate District, which is a great portion of Detroit, Lincoln Park, Allen Park, and Southgate. In addition to that, I am also the chairman of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus, so I take care of everybody. My background in social services spans over 30 years, so I've worked juvenile justice and worked with a lot of foster care and adult tuberculosis in the state of Florida, children with health services which have special needs in Washington, D.C. So I've engaged with a lot of individuals who have had what we call health issues, and that we need to make sure that we were humane in how we treat our peers. My background shaped my career as a legislator. Well, my 30 years of social services, where you deal with people on a regular, made it comfortable for me to deal with people. And then I worked in Mayor Duggan's administration in the city of Detroit for 7 years. So I learned the inner workings of municipal government and legislation.
Mm-hmm. And so the background that I bring, thank you for the reminder. So I have been doing this work as a therapist for over 25 years and have worked in different settings, whether that is working with adolescents on an inpatient setting, or working in a public health or public hospital where we got to work with amazing people and to get into the program, folks were HIV positive in recovery and homeless. And from that to working with students in college and grad school, and have had a private practice where I've worked with adolescents and adults. And so got to do a lot of that work. But as I also served as a county commissioner for 9 years in Washtenaw County and got to serve on the Community Mental Health Board. So I have both the public and private experience that I bring to the legislature and to the policy work that we all get to do together. And being able to have that kind of lens helps me in not only shaping the specific mental health policy that we get to work on, but in so many of the policies that we get to work on, mental health is a component, even if it's not explicitly stated. And so being able to have that lens, I think, sharpens us in terms of our ability to know what some of the on the ground ramifications are going to be for residents. And that's really important because sometimes there can be a disconnect between what people think might happen and what actually happens. And so I think for both of us, having that experience really helps in making much more reasonable policy for our residents.
And in addition, so this last year and a half of a pandemic, as it initially put the world on pause, it put us on pause. And those things that we've been working on and fighting for came to the forefront, whether it was racial disparities in healthcare, mental health, social justice issues. And all of these things were highlighted because we were at home watching those things happen around the country and around the world. So I think that the pandemic made it even more important for us to take a mental health view, because sitting at home isn't natural. And so folks who are probably going through things, it was magnified at home. So if there was somebody with some mental health issues at home, now they're stuck at home. They don't have a routine that they're used to doing and things like that. So we highlight those things in labeling people and how we need to be more compassionate and more together, and how we work through issues as a community and better for our humanity overall.
And one of the things that I've been thinking about during the pandemic is that we're relational, right? Like we're relational beings, and the pandemic had us all isolated from one another, and then that exacerbated something I actually said last night to some folks. Like we had a mental health crisis before the pandemic.
Right. So for me, my DNA is to be social.
That's right.
So now
That's right.
I was isolated
That's right.
at home.
That's right.
And so I was thinking about like folks who have issues at home.
Yeah.
So if you're in the house with somebody with an issue, even domestic abuse is a mental health traumatic issue.
Absolutely.
Now you're trapped in
That's
that
right.
house
That's right.
with that person that is either your abuser or verbally abusive.
Yep.
And you have no escape. You know, you can't go to work.
School.
Yeah. So all of those things are magnified. And what we really need to do is figure out how, as we return to our semi-new normal, how we encompass all of those things and bring in everything into the legislature, where the money goes.
Yep.
How do we make sure it gets to the right people who need for the greater good of everybody? So.
Yeah. I think that when you were talking, it made me think about, and then you said it, we have the opportunity now with the appropriations from the American Recovery Plan and, all those funds that we're getting now for the state of Michigan to actually, sew up some places where there are big caverns of, and holes in terms of services. And I think about the role that we get to do both at like local government gets to do as, the safety net. And I feel like we get to do that as a state. It's just on a much larger scale.
Well, I mean, we work in the field, so we understand that talking about it makes it easier for us to do things. So we got to be compassionate. But in the community, especially the Black community, and being in charge of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus, we as individuals have to deal with some other components of the taboo, the stigma of having some mental illness or some behavior illness that we try to hide in the Black community, but all communities they try to hide and shade, but we have a stigma with it, or you get labeled, she's crazy, or things like that, and then people treat you different as that stigma. So is it a public stigma, or is it just a social stigma, or is it that's like individually labeling and tagging people? And we have to educate everybody in a manner where we expose all of that and make everyone feel comfortable in any setting as often as possible.
Asking for help. Yeah. Being able to ask for help because of all the things that you just said. But even that, taking that leap of faith to ask for help can sometimes feel so daunting for folks when you have all these layers.
Well, again, there are groups of people who ask for help and get it, or it's recognized and they get it. Yeah. And then we've asked for help, and then things happen that exasperate the issues we have.
That's right.
So if a Black female with children asked for help, then her kids were taken away.
That's right.
And so so the system has failed us on so many occasions throughout history and throughout time, and it's been layered. And so how do we get to a new beginning? Or how do we change the dichotomy? And these are things that we need to do. I mean, I know it's Mental Health Awareness Week coming up, and we're talking about this stuff, but we talk about it every day.
Yeah, every day. Yeah, that our system, and I feel like it's something that you lead us through with the Black Caucus, but that all of us bring that lens and that sensitivity to that. Our systems unfortunately work differently for different people.
Yes, and so those are the things we got to work out and figure out how. Because we were talking yesterday about us talking to each other. Yeah, it's exhausting to go through it every day, and some groups of people don't even recognize your trauma, your pain.
That's right.
Like it, like I look normal, but I didn't grow up like I didn't just appear here today at 53. I went through some things. My family went through some things. My dad was an alcoholic, so I had issues I had to overcome. Luckily, I had folks around in the village to help me through some of these, but some of them were going through things, and then you have the grandmother who reaches a certain age and she becomes forgetful, and then you find out those kind of things are hereditary. So
Yes.
when you see another relative or your parent going through that, and you can't shame them into knowing, like, I'll give you a small story.
Great.
My grandmother was going through what I would say early stages, and my cousins and my aunts and them would yell at her to make her remember things. So like she'd say, I want to go home. You're at home.
Yeah.
So they call me,
Yeah.
I come over. She said, baby, I want to go home. So
Yeah.
I take her outside, put her in my car, literally drive around the block, get a McDonald's burger and a coffee and take her back home.
Yeah.
And she is enthusiastically happy.
Yeah.
But you can't, you need to meet them where they are.
Yep.
And I think we don't talk about meeting people where they are.
No, we don't, because the other thing that I hear is, your cousins also, like what I hear in the story that you just told is that part of, I'm guessing the reaction was they were scared, right? Here's their matriarch
Yeah.
who people had looked up to and had kept, I'm guessing, right? Like, and so many of,
we
like,
can
are
probably
like,
assess it.
right? Yeah, like kept the families together, and now, she was struggling, and like people like that can be really traumatic for folks and they don't know how to deal with that.
Especially if you've been leaning on that
That's
person
right.
to get you
For
through
years.
Yeah, so if you didn't develop the independence
That's right.
or the self-sufficiency to get through that. And
That's
so all
scary.
of these things are traumatic.
Yep.
And then just growing up, watching things, growing up in the neighborhood. So, I didn't grow up in the scariest of neighborhoods, but when my parents were getting divorced, I lived with several relatives.
Yeah.
And so I got to see different neighborhoods, different things. So growing up in urban America, you have PTSD just based on a stop by the police.
Right.
Just based on
What's going to happen?
the kid selling crack in the neighborhood, or the guy who got shot at the basketball court in front of you. Watching your father punch your mama in the face.
Yeah.
Or these are traumatic
Yeah.
events
Yeah.
that if you don't get help or someone around you is there to talk and help you relate through those things. And I think that's what scouting did for me, the guys that raised us in scouting.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we learned about these other things, but then scouting exposed us to different things around the country, around the world that we got to experience. And you got to hear other people be forthright and honest about what was going on in their lives. So it helped me develop a confidence to talk about issues.
Well, and it's interesting. As you were talking, it made me think about the other thing that we bring, not only our education and our background in terms of mental health, but who we are as people.
Yeah.
Right. So you were just talking about who you are as a person and the experiences that you had growing up, and that makes you the lawmaker who you are today.
Yeah. Think about what's going on.
That's
How
right.
does this legislation affect people that we normally don't have a voice?
Right.
So we got folks who have a voice for us. So are we speaking for the voiceless
That's right.
when we make this legislation? Because a lot of times we're looking at the big group.
Yeah.
And I think people only think about the big group when you have to think about the smaller groups or the disenfranchised groups. And so I was on a call just prior to us talking yesterday about law enforcement reform and the mental health issues that go with that and the trauma that goes along with policing the Black community or communities. And one of the bills that is in a package is about training. It's almost like de-escalation training, but if you're worked in mental health, you work as we work in social work, social services. When you take those courses, while you're learning about the community, while you're learning about de-escalation, while you're learning about therapeutic interventions, if you're doing it in a genuine context, you're learning about yourself.
Oh, sure.
And so you got to be candid about yourself. You learn a lot more about yourself, and you're slower to move and react and be thoughtful and deliberate in your interaction with folks. Right. And so I think that I've recommended on occasion, and part of the de-escalation is that at the academies, they should have social work 101, which would teach them de-escalation techniques and more things about themselves. Because a lot of those guys are coming from the military or whatever. They may have PTSD or be traumatized themselves and went to the military in their social conditioning. So all of this comes back to behavior, interaction, compassion, humanity. And so how do we work those things through in legislation? Because everything is a statute. Some things are policy within departments that we can influence, but other things have to be etched in law. And how do we separate but still make effective change.
I'm so glad we got to have this really important conversation today. Obviously for both Senator Bullock and I, we're really passionate about mental health and being able to connect folks with not only with services, but really lift up the role that we as legislators can play. One of the main things that we want to leave you with is talk to someone. Like being able and relating to other folks, like being able to talk to someone is so important. That's how we stay connected. That's how we get support from one another. There are so many amazing agencies and organizations in our communities that offer that support. But one of the best tools that we have is one another. And so, ask someone how they're doing today. Reach out to a friend. Don't be afraid for yourself to talk to someone. Especially during this month, during Mental Health Awareness Month, we want you to remember that message.